As far back as I can remember, I always loved to learn. But I did not grow up in an environment that had books or, a lot of knowledge to consume. We did, however, have television. We had a radio, one of those big radios, old radios with the big speakers, the wooden finish. And yeah, somehow I was always consuming, I would find the rare read, whether it's from a newspaper article or some magazine. I loved watching TV a lot, and I loved listening to music. And I listened a lot to other people's stories, which I found I really loved. I really got absorbed into listening to people. In all this consumption, I began to notice details and things, inconsistencies, repetitions, devices, styles, I remember one time when I was young, we were watching these detective shows because detective shows were popular in the 80s and 90s. So on this TV, and this guy gets shot in the forehead, bam, and he dies. And the person, obviously, who shot this guy runs away. And detectives somehow find out someone's been shot, and they show up. So what happens is they get there, they know it's a crime scene, they pull out their weapons, they are going into the house, and obviously the lead detective, the main character, is going to go directly to the room where this guy is shot. So as he gets to the door, I say out loud in the room, we're seated there in the sitting room, I say, he's going to turn around the door and point a gun at the dead guy and say, freeze. And for sure, that's what it did. So people at home couldn't believe it. They believed I'd seen the film before and stuff. And I was like the youngest person in the room. I think I was about grade 7 at the time. So yeah, it's in that, which I didn't realize at the time, that I'd began to realize these replications, these repetitions in film styles and films and stuff like that. Like it's something that had begun to live in my mind. My name is TSWARELO Mothobe. I'm a filmmaker and a music producer, and I'm here talking to you about the value of self-education and the instances or means through which it could occur. Morpheus in the first Matrix said, fate, it seems, is not without a sense of irony. This, in the light of, if I look through my early childhood, how this child who really loved to learn, who loved to consume, who had a mind like a jewel, and yet I did not get the adequate education formally. And yet informally, I consumed. I took in stuff. I learned stuff. I got an interest in music, and that way, through listening to music, I learned a lot about music without sitting through a music class. Through consuming film, I learned so much about film without me having sat through a film class. When we fast forward to me currently, as a filmmaker, I have learned this craft. I have learned about this craft from watching films by other filmmakers, from consuming other people's work in this very medium that I practice. And this I find lacking a lot locally, this love of the very craft that one practices, not as a practitioner, but largely as a fan, as a groupie. I'm a groupie of film and filmmakers. And I speak to a lot of artists, I speak to a musician. And when I speak to a musician and we start talking music, automatically my mind, I begin to geek out. I begin to become a geek about a particular song or an album that someone put out, or a genre of music or a style, the arrangement, the composition, the musicality of everything, how I understand. And most of the times I find a lot of musicians that I would speak to don't know anything about that, except that they are talented in the very work that they do. I speak to a lot of filmmakers, and somebody wants to be an editor, somebody is a cinematographer, somebody is a production designer. And I geek out. I start referencing these films that I love. If you are a cinematographer, I'll talk about Blade Runner 2049 or the cinematography in Mad Max and stuff like that. And almost all the time, I'm talking to myself. I'm like alone in this space. You know, it would be lovely even if this particular person I'm talking to did not watch, as per se, this particular film, but then also challenges me with another. You know, I'm going to hit them with an American film, Blade Runner 2049, and they tell me about some Korean film that I didn't watch, or some Nigerian film that I didn't watch whose cinematography was like, you know, amazing. And that will be a challenge. So it will sort of like become a sparring of minds. But almost all the time, you know, you find somebody says, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an editor, but they are very oblivious about all these works that have been well edited and the likes. And for me, the importance of that is it's been a great source of education. See, when you consume other art that you practice, and when you consume, even before you make your first film, it starts you on a level, a very high level. Before you make your first song, before you make your first art piece, by just understanding this craft that people have been practicing since time whenever, that has been a craft that's been practiced and perfected, and you know, it's evolved, it's grown in itself, you get to a point where you are not starting at zero. You understand the history. I think this is why we study history in schools. You understand the history, so you understand how we come to be, this is the definition of history, how we come to be what we are today, the study of the past. And so in every craft there is that. You know, okay, this song, this has evolved this way, this has gotten to, and we are here today, and you are starting from today. You are not starting from 1657 or whenever this particular thing started. Self-education can occur in multiple ways, but whichever field you are in, it must occur, and you have to be aware of it. Today, the world is this infinite, abundant library, and people have it in the palm of their hands. You know, there's websites, there's tutorials, there's online courses, there's podcasts, there's all this information out there just ready to be consumed. One can, you know, attend an online course if that particular course is not available in their environment immediately, or if they do not have time to attend it because they have to work earlier. Yet again, the most intriguing and interesting means for me has been through consuming this very medium that I love, art. This is music, this is photography, this is film, this is theater. Consuming that has educated me way, way more than having to sit down and attend class. It remains ever interesting to consume what you love. Imagine your favorite dish. Now imagine if you ate your favorite dish, you became more intelligent, and you made money. That would be the perfect world. And with art, or with genres of art, or with learning through consuming what you love, it's like an infinity of favorite dishes. Like, you know what, I never knew I liked that, or I never knew I'd like that. You know, because you just consume and consume all the time. There's always something new. There's always a new way to approach it. There's always something intriguing, something that you didn't think you like. You might think I didn't like this form of music initially, but a couple of years down the line, you hear it in a different context, in a different frame of mind, you know, and it's, you know, it appeals, you know, and that in itself is very uplifting and very, very important, you know, in the process of education, in the process of educating self. This consumption has been, for me, my only means at an education. And it's constant, it's always happening, you know, because there's always new ideas, new approaches to doing stuff, new skills, new techniques, you know, new creativity is always new. And because of that, I never stop learning. I've never stopped learning since I was a child. I've never stopped learning until now. I haven't stopped learning till now. I'm still learning every day. I'm sure I learn something new, some of which I'm aware, some of which I'm not aware, but it comes when the use of that knowledge is needed. Some of it, when the use of that knowledge is needed, it is there, it occurs, and some of it just is an education that serves only to develop me, to grow me as a person. See, when I started out in film, I was intrigued by directors, film directors, you know, directors that wrote their own work and directed it. Because when you go back in film history, there were fewer directors that wrote their work. You know, some directors purely, and some directors write. But there was a point where there was this generation of directors who write their own work and direct their own work. And to me, that was amazing. That was something. But then as I went deeper into film, and given also my environment and the needs of my environment, I learned editing. I had to edit. You know, I learned that. I learned the tech theories and techniques of editing. And then eventually I needed my films to look cool, because, okay, I've got a good story, because I also came from a writing background. I have a good story, I have a good idea, but if I don't know anything about cinematography, if I don't know anything about cameras and light and all those technicalities, you know, there isn't much of a good film I'm going to have. So I learned that part. I educated myself on that part. And then, you know, come currently, I noticed another field of film that, you know, is lacking: production design. And so it became my interest to knowledge myself on production design, to get into it. So I look back at my films, I noticed I can categorize them, all the things that I've shot, I can categorize them into, here I was trying to be a director. Here I was really trying to pronounce the edit. It's the part in my life I was really finding education, discovering editing. Here, this is the part where I was discovering cinematography and all that. Here is the part now where I'm getting and dabbling into production design and the likes. And also with all these film genres, because I believe film is this one medium where you can bring every art form, everything to the center. You bring film to it. You've got acting, you've got theater in it, you've got literature in it, you've got music in it, you've got photography, you've got all these things. Then you go even further when you do your production design. You've got carpentry, you've got metalwork, architecture, you know. So I began to learn DIY and interior deco just to be able to understand and to approach my production design. I've built sets. I build sets from scratch for some of the things that I shoot now, you know, as opposed to just going to a natural environment and shooting as it is. So this is where I feel self-education has equipped me, you know, with the necessary drive, with the necessary, you know, knowledge to meet what need there is in any specific point in my life. If I need to learn about something, you know, I'm not hindered. I'm not just looking to find where can I get a professional in this. Yes, professionals are important, they are needed. But for me in film, it helps if I'm to direct a good film for me to have a full understanding of, you know, the whole picture, everything that happens to get a good film out. And that's what self-education has helped me. I've gotten to a point where now I can then go ahead and specialize in the very thing that I love. Listen, I want to direct, I've got a vision. But I understand how to communicate with the cinematographer, with an editor, with a production designer, with the sound guy, with, you know, just the whole picture with the actors and all that. I have an understanding of that because of all this self-education.